Elections around the democratic world are now being decided by an outside factor, the Trump factor. From Canada to Australia to Singapore, candidates who are able to show to their electorate that they can stand up to Trump and they can navigate the Trump tariffs are winning elections. In Australia this weekend, incumbent Prime Minister Anthony Albanese led the centre-left Labour Party and won a second term. Getting a second term is seen as a holy grail in Aussie politics, which now Albanese has managed to breach. His main challenger was Peter Dutton, leader of the Conservative Liberal National Coalition. Polls had indicated that Albanese's Labour Party was the favourites to win, with most surveys showing Labour ahead of the Liberal coalition. Dutton had his back against history. He was attempting to defy both historical trends and earlier polling. No opposition party has ousted a first-term government since 1931. Albanese had called for an early election 5 months ahead of schedule, anticipating the economic headwind that have now become the Trump tariffs. The dominant concerns for Australians were cost of living, high inflation, and a housing shortage. This election was unusual in that foreign policy, particularly the Trump factor, had become a significant issue. Trump's threats of renewed tariffs and all the trade volatility as a result of that made Australian voters wary, particularly given Australia's huge exposure to the global markets and also to China. Australia is a massive source of rare earths as well as minerals which are exported in large measure either to China or even to Western markets. Now, traditionally, in Australian elections or in any democratic elections, foreign policy has not necessarily been a decisive election issue. But Trump's protectionist trade stand and the tariff threats have made it a top concern for Australians in 2025. Both major parties in Australia addressed the risks of Trump's tariffs. Labor had positioned itself as being better able to manage the America relationship and also the economic shocks that are coming in from a volatile Trump administration. In fact, some Australian polls had showed the opposition leader Dutton leaking support because of Trump. In fact, Dutton had earlier this year praised Trump as a big thinker with gravitas on the global stage. Albanese, on the other hand, condemned Trump's tariffs as an economic self-harm act. He also said that these were not the actions of a friend.
For Australia, these tariffs are not unexpected, but let me be clear, they are totally unwarranted. The administration's tariffs have no basis in logic, and they go against the basis of our two nations partnership. This is not the act of a friend.
There is now clearly emerging evidence that being the candidate who is best placed to stand up to Trump is one of the decisive factors for voters. The ability to manage the American relationship and to protect Australia's trade interests by Albanese was seen as a key electoral asset. Albanese promised to embrace renewable energy, tackle a worsening housing crisis. He also promised to pour more money into a creaking healthcare system. The Liberal Party leader, who also happened to be a former police officer, Dutton, he wanted to slash immigration, crack down on crime, and ditch a long-standing ban on nuclear power. Economic concerns dominated the contest for many Australian households, many of whom are struggling to pay inflated prices for milk, bread, power, and petrol. A total of 18 million voters enrolled for the election. More than a third of them had already cast an early ballot. Voting is compulsory in Australia. There are enforced fines up to 20 Australian dollars, which leads to a turnout that oftentimes tops 90%, which in the democratic world is unheard of. But it's not just Australia. Singapore's general election too saw Prime Minister Lawrence Wong leading the ruling People's Action Party to a massive landslide. Wong won his first electoral mandate since taking over from Lee Hsien Loong, the son of Singapore's founder and modern-day maker Lee Kuan Yew. The main opposition, the Workers' Party, led by Pritam Singh, contested fewer than a third of the seats.
What the US is doing now is not reform. It is rejecting the very system it created. The US may have decided to turn protectionist, but the rest of the world does not have to follow the same path. We will identify other partners to join us and work around this to ensure resilience and maintain critical parts of the multilateral system while laying the foundations for a possible new and different global system that can be achievable later.
Both the ruling party and the opposition have presented a united front against American protectionism. They've emphasized the need for Singapore to remain trade resilient and united in the face of global trade uncertainty. In Singapore, like in Australia, Prime Minister Wong and his ability to stand up to Trump and negotiate favorable trade deals is seen as an important for his leadership image. But the PAP's electoral dominance means that election outcomes in Singapore hinge mostly on domestic issues and the overall performance of the party. But the Australia and Singapore examples were preceded by what happened, and quite dramatically at that, in Canada recently. The most striking example is Mark Carney's unexpected victory in Canada in the 2025 federal election. Carney is a former central banker. He's got no prior experience in elected office. He leveraged his reputation for economic stewardship and to manage crises, and he managed to assure Canadians that he was best equipped to defend Canada against Trump's aggressive trade policies and also his annexation threats. Initially, he was trailing the Conservatives by more than 20 points. Carney's campaign then gained momentum as Trump imposed new tariffs on Canadian goods. Trump had even publicly suggested on a number of occasions that Canada should simply become the 51st American state. These were provocations that sparked a huge surge of Canadian nationalism and anti-Trump sentiment, which peaked across the country.
He respects, as others who are good negotiators, and he's one of the best negotiators, they respect strength. That's why we're building Canada strong. There's lots of reasons to build Canada strong, but the point is, and I will make this point repeatedly, we have more than enough to do here at home. That point about we can give ourselves more than the Americans can take away is absolutely right.
So one thing is clear, in democratic countries around the world, and more so, as we are seeing in Canada, Australia, even in Singapore, being able to stand up to Trump is becoming an important political asset. Any candidate who can convince their voters that he or she can manage the American relationship and mitigate the impact of Trump tariffs is at a political advantage.